No, now we talk about how to blow up buildings. We also talk about the towers in a little while. One, 2, 3 o'clock. 4 o'clock. Wrong. Okay. Everybody's here. When NIST came out, I told you about this preliminary report they came out with in 2004. And in this report they wrote in big capital letters, yellow letters, the NIST sieht keine Beweise, dass der Zusammenbruch von W-7 durch Bomben, Raketen oder einer Sprengung verursacht wurde. Hey, why do they have to write this? Many of us thought, nobody's talked about bombs or rockets, and this is called controlled demolition. What is that? Well, I'll show you. A lot of dust. I don't know. This is from Birmingham, Alabama. It's not the same.
It's the same, I think.
And now I'm going to show you a video with a Dutch demolition expert called Daniel Winkel. And Dutch television put him in front of a computer and showed him Building 7. He had never seen it before. It's in Dutch. I don't have it with German subtitles. So I hope you can follow the English subtitles. And as I understand, you probably pick up Dutch better than I do.
De mensen die geloven in het complot hebben het vaak over gebouw nummer 7. Dat was een wolkenkrabber van 47 verdiepingen naast de Twin Towers. Op 11 september 2001 heeft er brand gewoed, maar er is nooit een vliegtuig in gevlogen. Toch is ook dit gebouw op 11 september ingestort. Deze gebeurtenis heeft nooit veel aandacht gekregen en ook Denny Jorenko heeft er nooit van gehoord. Zijn reactie op de beelden die we laten zien is onbevangen.
Zie je naar boven gaan? Nee, die gaat vanaf onder.
Die gaat vanaf onder, ja.
Toch?
Ja.
Ze hebben gewoon kolommen weggeblazen. Dus naspringen.
Dit valt anders dan het World Trade Center.
Vind je niet dan?
Ja, je ziet het, de onderste verdiepingen gaan eerst.
Ja, de rest zakt er dan in. Dus dit is controlled demolition.
Zeker weten.
Zeker weten. Dat is nasprongen. Dit is een opdracht gebeurd. Dat heeft een team gedaan, een expres.
Maar dit is ook op 11 september gebeurd.
Dezelfde dag?
Dezelfde dag.
Dezelfde dag? Weet je dat zeker?
Ja.
Was het zeker weten het 11e? Ja, heel erg.
7 uur nadat de World Trade Center aan de regio.
Ja? Hebben ze hard gewerkt?
Van de FIMA staat dat ze niet kunnen verklaren waarom gebouw nummer 7 is ingestort. Uitgebreid bespreken we alle mogelijke oorzaken met Denny Jowenko.
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar het zijn wel.
Maar hij blijft erbij dat het gebouw is opgeblazen.
Het is wat zonder weer. We weten heel goed wat ze doen, die jongens.
De vraag is dan, is zoiets van tevoren voorbereid of kan dat op 11 september zelf moet zijn besloten en uitgevoerd?
Met hoeveel man heeft u hoeveel tijd nodig om dat te doen?
Dat weet ik niet precies, maar
Maakt u een inschatting?
ja, dan moet je wel ervaren mensen hebben, maar als je een man of 30, 40 zou hebben. Kijk, een paar met de snijbranden, de rest breekt man. Andere mensen sluiten de deadcord met die boosters aan. Dat moet dan precies allemaal op hetzelfde moment gaan. En weer een derde die zet de elektronische systemen erop. En dan gaat hij.
Terwijl overal brand was en ook in dat gebouw was brand.
Niet
Dus
gebeurd.
ze hebben de brand niet geblust. Dus de mensen die dat moesten doen, die moesten het doen terwijl het binnen nog brandde.
Ja, dat is vreemd. Dat is vreemd. Dat vind ik ook heel vreemd. Geen verklaring voor.
Okay. And here is another famous video with the owner of the World Trade Center. His name is Larry Silverstein. He built the 7, but he leased the rest of World Trade Center for 99 years in July 2001. That is 6 weeks prior to the terror attack. And he did 2 things. One is that he exchanged the company responsible for security for the whole complex. Another thing is that he insured the World Trade Center new insurance, and among other things, it was covered against terrorist attack for an amount of $3.5 billion. And when it later on was hit by 2 airliners, he meant that he should have $7 billion. And he almost got that. Not quite, but yes.
And he insured those towers especially against attack with planes.
No,
Yes.
Okay, could be.
Is.
Yeah, okay. The comment up here is that it was specified also it was insured by an impact hitting by airlines.
Special footnote in the insurance contract.
Okay, didn't know that. But now here's Larry Silverstein from a production by the public broadcasting system called America Rebuilt, where he was asked about Building 7. Maybe I should jump up to like the sound now.
I remember getting a call from the fire department to tell me that they were not sure they would be able to contain the fire. I said, you know, we've had such terrible loss of life. The smartest thing to do is pull. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse.
I remember getting a call from the fire department commander telling me that maybe they would not be able to contain the fire. And I said, well, we have had such a terrible loss of life, maybe the smarter thing would be just to pull it. And they made that decision to pull, and then we watched the building collapse. This is what Mr. Silverstein said. And to pull it among demolition workers means to take down the thing. So it was maybe a little unfortunate. The next day, his press secretary sent out a statement where Mr. Silverstein said that what he had meant was that the fire department commander should pull back the operation, should pull back his men.
Sure.
And to that you can comment that there were no men to pull back or pull. There was no operation. There had been no firefighter in the building since 11:30. Everything was completely cleared, and a distance within 5 blocks, which is half a kilometer around Building 7, was completely cleared. Everybody knew it was coming down. Yes, your question?
Sorry, he made a claim on the first two.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
He made an insurance claim on Twin Towers. Did he also make a claim on Building 7? If so, what?
Yeah, as I understand, maybe there's somebody present who knows more about this, but as I understand, it covered the whole complex. Otherwise, yes, I think, because according to the official story, 7 came down, what do you say, indirectly due to the airliners. But as another comment to what Mr. Silverstein said and what pull it means, if you're a little interested in language, what he said was they made that decision to pull and then we watched the building. And then, so the last half of the sentence is related to the first half of the sentence in a cause-effect relationship. They watched the building come down because they made that decision to pull. This is what goes on in his mind when he says this. He sees the building coming down when they made that decision to pull. So much for Mr. Silverstein. Now, what you might fancy now is that I am trying to pursue a new hypothesis called controlled demolition. And the rest of today, my presentation, we will talk about how to blow up buildings. You can, if you are interested, you can go into a website called How Stuff Works, where you can see many wonderful things. Among them is how to become a blaster. And what you do is, of course, you have to get the blueprints of the building and the drawings of the whole thing. And then what demolition companies do these days is they develop a computer model of the whole building, not only to find out what would you call them, Belastung in German, the loads on the different beams will be, but also you can also run the whole demolition within the software. That is, you can put explosive charges, different points in the building, and see what the effect will be. So they can run through the whole demolition in virtual space and refine the very, very delicate sequence of explosions which has to be carried out in order to see a result like this. And but it's not only a problem of calculations, it's also an art. Intuition plays a very big role. These people know, have a feeling, have an experience that how to get buildings down. So they also take decisions based on intuition very much. Now to take over a chimney, they don't, this is kids stuff. But to take a big structure down into its own footprint is an engineering challenge which can only be undertaken by the biggest companies, most experienced companies in the world. And there's less than a handful of them which can take care of structures, real big structures. To do demolition, you need some tools, and these are explosives. Good old dynamite is fine for concrete and cement. And it was invented, you know, by Alfred Nobel, the Swede, in 1868. But if you want to cut steel beams, you need some hotter stuff. And for that purpose, the chemists have developed thousands, I think, at least hundreds, different explosives. That the most popular one for steel beams are called RTX. And here you see the chemical structure. Cyclotrimethylene trinitramine is the chemical name of it. And if you're interested afterwards, I can tell you why it is really nasty stuff. You'll see that the burn rate moves about 20 times faster than the speed of sound. So it really goes through the sound barrier many, many times. It hurts the ears. And this is the most popular thing you use. They are used in formulation what they call beam cutters. This is what American demolition workers are I'm mounting here. It's a so-called beam cutter, and you'll notice you have a beam cutter on each side of this beam, and the point is that an explosive knocks things over. I have to check it. This is how an explosive works, by means of it builds a very high pressure very fast, so it knocks things over. And this happens here at an angle, and the point is, of course, that the whole beam should shift over. When they come like this, the whole beam shifts, and if they have 4 beams next to each other, the whole building actually shifts over before it goes down. And then some people thought that it was remarkable that on ground zero, some of the steel beams appeared with these cut at an angle, and maybe there's a little cut here also. But this picture is controversial because somebody is claiming that it is from a much later stage in the cleanup process. And to that I would say that these gentlemen here in the front are firefighters, and they were allowed to look for the remains of their colleagues. There were 340 something of them killed during the collapse, and they were allowed to do this until September the 29th. So it must be pretty early. So much for that. Before we leave the subject of explosives, I want to show you 2 little videos. The one is David Chandler, the other physicist, which I mentioned before, and it's called the North Tower Explosion. This video has a German voiceover. But I'll still give it a little introduction, because it shows you how the enormous powers at work here. You'll see steel beams more than 10 tons being thrown up in the air and out. But otherwise, I think it's pretty. What he does is he takes a little loop, a little sequence of the collapse of the North Tower, and loops it again and again. And the point is that we should have our attention at different aspects of what we're seeing. David Chandler, I love him. He's a very good physics teacher.
Der Ausgangspunkt der Wissenschaft ist die Beobachtung. Hier sehen Sie, was mit dem Nordturm des World Trade Centers geschah. Das zweite von 3 Gebäuden, die am 11. September 2001 einstürzten. Ich verwende das Wort einstürzen, aber Worte können trügen. Was sieht man hier tatsächlich? Es gibt eine enorme Menge fallender Trümmer. Aber sehen Sie unter dem Schirm der Trümmer die schnelle Abfolge an explosiven Ausstößen von Material? Für einige wurden Geschwindigkeiten von über 160 Stundenkilometern ermittelt. Ich werde diese Ausstöße Explosionen nennen, denn es ist schwierig, für das, was wir hier sehen, andere Worte zu finden. Es sind nicht nur einige vereinzelte, sie erscheinen ständig über weite Bereiche. Sie wandern die Gebäudeseiten entlang nach unten, schritthaltend mit den fallenden Trümmern. Vielleicht können Sie sich eine natürliche Ursache dafür vorstellen, ich nicht. Die Explosionen treten zeitgleich in mehreren Stockwerken auf, über einen weiten Bereich, nicht Etage für Etage, was man noch mit fallenden Geschossdecken erklären könnte. Beachten Sie die Explosion weit unterhalb des einstürzenden Gebäudeabschnitts. Einige haben isolierte, scharfe Jets. Derartige Hochgeschwindigkeitsstaubjets treten bei Gebäudesprengungen häufig auf. Doch dies hier ist keine gewöhnliche Sprengung. Das Gebäude wird fortschreitend von oben nach unten durch Wellen von Explosionen zerstört, wodurch ein immenses Trümmerfeld entsteht. Die Zerstörung erfolgt in Wellen, nicht in einer einzigen Welle. Am deutlichsten ist die schnelle Abfolge von Explosionen in der Nähe der sichtbaren Ecke des Gebäudes. Aber zeitgleich können wir wesentlich weiter unten, unter dem Schirm der fallenden Trümmer, eine andere Welle von Explosionen sehen. Beachten Sie, dass sich beide Explosionswellen über diese Gebäudeseite nach unten bewegen und nahezu mit den fallenden Trümmern Schritt halten. Es fielen keine Betonplatten zu Boden und zerbarsten dort zu Staub. Es gibt kaum massiven Beton im Trümmerhaufen. Beachten Sie, wie der Beton mit Wucht aus den Seiten des Gebäudes herausgestoßen wird, bereits zu Staub pulverisiert. Eingebettet in diese Staubwolken werden enorme Stahlstützen und zusammenhängende Stahlrahmen aus dem Gebäude geschleudert. Einige hatten eine horizontale Geschwindigkeit von mehr als 110 Stundenkilometer. Manche dieser Stützen bohrten sich in benachbarte Gebäude. Einige landeten sogar 2 Fußballfeldlängen vom Fuße des Turmes entfernt. Was könnte schwere Stahlstützen mit solcher Kraft wegschleudern und beschleunigen? Man hat vorgeschlagen, dass das herunterrasende Gewicht des Turmes die Stahlträger verbog, wonach diese wie gespannte Federn seitlich wegschnellten. Aber wir sehen nicht vereinzelt wegschnellende Stahlstützen. Wir sehen, wie ein Großteil der Masse des Gebäudes, Stahl, Beton, Büroeinrichtungen und menschliche Überreste, reduziert zu kleinen Stücken und Staub, in alle Richtungen herausgestoßen wird. Man fand Knochensplitter auf den Dächern benachbarter Gebäude. Diese Knochen wurden nicht in der fallenden Masse zermahlen, denn dann wären sie im Trümmerhaufen gewesen. Sie wurden zusammen mit allem anderen pulverisiert und in alle Richtungen geschleudert. Die Leute von NAST behaupten, dass der obere Teil des Gebäudes oberhalb der Einschlagstelle wie eine Ramme heruntergekommen sei und dabei den unbeschädigten unteren Teil des Gebäudes der Länge nach zerschmettert. Offensichtlich ist der obere Teil des Gebäudes aber gar nicht mehr vorhanden. Es gibt nichts oberhalb des Ringes von Explosionen außer breiten Jets aus Trümmern und Staub. Sehen?
Okay, I got it here. I think we've seen enough. This is one of the steel beams, just to give you an expression that had been thrown more than 100 meters, like a spike into a building across the street. Another thing is, so much for explosives, but there was another thing happening coming out of the South Tower before it collapsed, which is here. Around the 70s, the 80s floor, there's something running out of the South Tower. It hasn't collapsed yet. It's 5 minutes before collapse. Something's running out here. It's a liquid, it's red. Apparently it's a red liquid metal. There's another recording of the same phenomenon from another camera. There's no sound. Here you see something is running out here, and it's red, which is very important. It's a molten metal and it's red. And even NIST recognized in their report that whatever was running down the South Tower this time has an orange glow. Which means that this is not aluminium. Because aluminum, when it melts, and it has a melting point of 660 degrees Celsius, which you can obtain in an ordinary office fire, 660 degrees. But molten aluminum is silvery white. It's white like silver. And this one is red, and it is not gold, and it's not copper. There's only one metal which can account for this observation, and this is molten iron. Only problem is that iron melts at 1538 degrees centigrade. And this is a temperature you can never obtain in an office fire. No way. So we only have one chemical reaction, actually, which can be explained by this observation, and this is called thermite, oder ein Thermit in Deutsch. And I'm happy actually to do this in Germany, because this chemical reaction was discovered by a German chemist called Hans Goldschmidt in 1893. It was published in 1893. And he found out that if you take aluminum and as a fine powder, very, very small particles, and mix it with another powder of iron oxide or rust, and if you mix these two powders, like you mix sugar and flour, if you can make them react, the reaction is very violent in terms of heat. There's a lot of heat being developed, and in the reaction you get iron, which comes out in a molten state, and at a temperature around 2,500 degrees centigrade. And the other product is aluminum oxide. This is a very useful thing because it can be used for welding. And it was patented by Goldschmidt in 1898 and used for the first time in 1899 in Essen, in Ruhr, to weld tram rails. And all blacksmiths know what a thermite welding is, and it's used particularly for welding rails, tram rails, and train rails. But because the iron coming out of it has such a high temperature, it can also be used for destruction and destructing other iron items, in particular armor, panzer. So for this reason, thermite is used for military applications, in torpedoes and grenades, for going through iron things. And thermite is not an explosive. It is what the Americans call an incendiary. We do not have a particular word for that in Danish, and I don't think you have it in German either. Brandsatz. Yeah? Wonderful. But it can be used to put on fires, obviously, but it can also be used to destroy things by means of heat. An explosive destroys things by means of pressure. It knocks things over. But thermite destructs things by means of heat. Ein Brandsatz. Thank you, I remember that. I should write it down. So now I'll show you what thermite can do to a French car.
This is thermite. It's a powdered mixture of iron oxide and aluminium, which when ignited burns at 2,500 degrees Celsius, which is very, very hot. This is cum. It's been specially chosen to be destroyed because it's old, it's white, but more importantly, because it's French. The engine block is the densest part of the car. It's basically a huge lump of metal, and well, it's very hard to melt. Lucky then, the brain X have plenty of thermite, specially packed into the slow release mechanism of a garden flower pot. A big pile of bonnets directly over the engine block should do the trick. Time to light the fuse and give this homage to French engineering the send-off it so richly deserves.
Now you should see what's going on under the car.
Thermite reaction begins. Within seconds, the fiery concoction eats through the bonnet, spraying molten thermite into the engine beneath. The devastation continues inside until finally a torrent of white-hot liquid metal falls out of the bottom, signaling the inevitable victory for thermite. A quick check confirms a clear path of destruction through the engine.
Now you may think, well, maybe Niels is trying to tell us that thermite took down the towers, or at least held along. But then we have the obvious problem of how to destroy a vertical beam, because what we saw on the French car was how the molten iron came out of the hole in the poor flower pot and then went right through the engine block. But the speed was going down was, how can you possibly destroy a vertical beam by means of thermite? Well, that problem has been solved many times over. All you have to do is just to put the thermite into some container, and it will find its way out. For military purposes, of course, you use very strong iron steel containers. But I'll show you a little device you can buy if you want to burn your house down while you're on vacation in the Canaries. And it's an advertisement. It's very short, so I have to show you exactly what you are going to see. And you'll see this little device here. It's just the size of this. There'll be two wires coming up from the device because it started electrically. And you'll see it mounted in front of a steel beam or an iron beam, I really don't know. And you'll see how it works. That's it. And please notice that there was no sound here, it just a psst. It doesn't make any noise. So, there are many, actually I have a list of more than 10 different evidences that thermite also was applied during the demolition of the World Trade Center. One is that the occurrence of liquid iron in the rubble long time after the 9/11. This picture is taken 8 weeks after 9/11, when the workers were digging down into the rubble, and they pulled up the steel beams. They were dripping red from one end of them. I have found 23 witness reports of pools, of streams of molten iron observed during the cleanup operation. Very, very convincing. Other pictures here, and this is a thermite reaction from the laboratory, just to make sure you get the right associations. This picture, I do not know when it was taken. It must be a little late, but I just wonder what is going on. Something is going on here. Another very strong evidence is that the NASA, who you all know from the space program, but they do many things. One thing they did here was they took an airplane, and flew over ground zero with an infrared sensitive camera so they could measure the temperature right on the surface, exactly on the surface. And this was done on September the 16th here. So this is not a geographical map, it's the thermal map. And so you have one down, World Trade Center 1 down here, 2, and you have 7 up here. And the color codes corresponding here to temperature here on 750 degrees centigrade, and up here on 730 degrees centigrade. Now this is the surface temperature. It's simply what the temperature of the very surface. And this is 5 days after 9/11. And in the intermediate days, it had been raining. And particularly on the 14th, it had been pouring down what the English call cats and dogs, showers. And still, you have temperatures here which you can never reach in an ordinary office fire. So this is kind of suspicious. Something is going on. There are many witnesses of these pools of molten iron, and of course, you haven't seen them from ordinary fires. You don't see this when the building is burning. And none of the official accounts mention this phenomenon. And this simply flatly denies that there's been any findings of molten iron in the rubble. I call this the longest smoking gun in history because the fires at Ground Zero were officially extinguished not before December the 20th. It took them at least 3 months to put out the fires. And did they try? They did. They poured on millions of gallons of water. They used synthetic, what you call it, fire extinguisher called pyrocool, fire suppressant, is the proper word, called pyrocool. They just couldn't put it up, and actually I can tell you it continued into February. Something continued to happen. And this is no ordinary fire taking 3 months to extinguish. Something was happening. Another thing is, now we take a look at the dust, which should be called powder, but everybody is calling it dust, so do we. And very early on, in 2003, already a commercial company called the R.J. Lee Group came out with a complete mapping investigation and account of the dust, characterization of the dust. And also the United States Geological Survey came out in 2005 with also a very detailed analysis of the dust, account, description of what they found in the dust. And from that there was so many indications that extremely high temperatures had been present during the collapse of the towers, which I do not have time to come into now. But because of these reports, there was an American scientist called Stephen E. Jones who had realized that he had to take a look at the dust. And now I should tell you a story about a woman called Janet McKinley who lived on the corner of Cedar Street and Liberty Street. She lived here. So she had a view actually of the plaza, and when the South Tower came down, she ran away from her apartment with a wet towel around her mouth, because the dust was not very healthy to breathe. And she was allowed to come back about a week later. And this is what her apartment looked like. So she really had some cleaning job. Overall, there was a thick layer of dust all over, sometimes in thicknesses between 10 and 20 centimeters. She had, for some reason, a kind of spiritual relationship with this dust. She had a feeling that it was important, and she also has an artistic mind. So she collected some of the dust and kept it in a plastic bag with the intention to make some piece of art with it later on. I'm talking about her in the past tense. Was, because she died here a couple of months ago, last year, from a brain tumor, and she was a great hero, and many people speculated about her disease. But she, going back to 2006, Stephen Jokes came in contact with Janet McKinley and eventually got the sample of her dust collected, and he put it under a microscope. And this is what it looked like on an electron microscope. There are no colors in electron microscopy. Some of the particles are irregular in shape, what you would expect from crushed concrete, but some of the particles are completely round. And here is a close-up of one of these particles, and you see complete, perfect sphere. And also, if you take a plastic bag and you pull a strong, if you have the dust in the plastic bag, and you have this very strong magnet, and you pull it along the plastic bag, something comes along with the magnet out of the bag. And what comes along with the magnet, most of it, are these spheres, containing these spheres in very high concentration. So, and you know that if something becomes magnetic, it contains iron. And very right, this is an iron sphere. I'll show you in a while how we can actually identify the composition of these. But the problem here is that iron melts at 1538 degrees centigrade. How can an iron particle become so perfectly round? This only has one explanation, and this is that sometimes in its history it has been molten and it has been upflying. This is a property of liquid droplets. If, for instance, if you observe a frog in a microscope or a great magnifying glass, you will see that the little droplets are perfectly round. Or if you look at the fat pearls in your skim milk, you'll also observe that the liquid droplets are perfectly round. And it's a property with the liquid called surface tension, which makes them take this perfect shape. So this means this iron has been molten. And may I remind you that iron is melting at 1538 degrees centigrade. Now what Jones did, he's a great experimentalist. He loved doing experiments. So he fired a thermite, and you can buy it if you wish to on eBay. On the web, you can buy thermite. And he fired it in the corner of the laboratory. The white cloud up here is the other product of the thermite reaction. It's the aluminum oxide. But it's sputtering here like on the French car. After the experiment, he just collected whatever the remains were, the ashes around here, put them under a microscope. And this is what he saw from the commercial thermite. And you recognize the same particles here as you did in the picture I showed you just before from the dust, where we had these iron particles. Now, how do we know that this is the same material we see here and here? Well, we do something, and then I have to teach you just a little bit of science. It's not that complicated. We use a technology called energy dispersive spectroscopy, where you have an electron beam, which is like the little red dot here. You can direct it onto some spot which you want to investigate. And we can point this electron beam with an accuracy better than 1/1000th of a millimeter, 100 nanometers. We can do this, so accurate we can do that. And you hit it with the electron beam, and out comes an X-ray signal, Röntgenstrahlung. And then you analyze the X-rays coming out of it, and this is such a spectrum from such an analysis. From that you can tell exactly which elements was present when the electron beam hit. Fe means iron, Ca means calcium, K means potassium, kalium, Se means silicium, aluminum, magnesium, sodium or natrium, also in Danish, and another iron. And here, over here, you recognize the same elements. You see the iron, you see the calcium, you see the potassium, the kalium, you see the silicon, aluminum, magnesium. You also see a little sulfur dot here, which is due to contamination from a wallboard, Gips in German, right? Because Gips, or gypsum in English, is calcium sulfate. So this is, and the center of the towers were completely packed in wallboard, which in Danish we call them gipsplader. These are gipsplatten. It makes a lot of sense. Yeah. So that is what the core of the towers were completely packed in. It's very good insulation against fires. So this is the contamination of some gips. Okay. Now, Jones asked himself the question, whenever you have an explosion, there's always something left. An explosion is never perfect. And maybe the same thing would be true about thermite. It could be that it could be remains of unreacted thermite in the WT center dust. And this was a picture he released in December 2007. And true, yes, we do find remains of thermite in the dust. But it does not look like what was used on the French car. It has a completely different appearance. We are talking here about what we call them chips. These are small, very, very flat chips. The biggest one being just a few millimeters long. This is the biggest one. I think it's 2 millimeters from one end to the other. And it is bilayered. It's red on one side and it's gray on the other side. And I can reveal now that the reason why it's red is because it contains rust particles, iron oxide. And eventually, I think I jumped the picture here, didn't I? Yes, I'll take this one first, because it tells you just some about the dimensions of the, this is the thickness, this is a cross-section electron microscope picture. So I have to tell you, there's no colors here. This is the red layer, this is the gray layer. And it's about 1/10 of a millimeter thick. This is 1/10 of a millimeter. And many of the red-gray chips are just as long, so you need a microscope to find them, and some experience to recognize them. Now, eventually, after this was published, I was asked to join the team of scientists, which eventually made a scientific study of these chips, and it was published on April 3rd in 2009. I'll just show you a little few highlights of what is most important. The most important feature of these chips, which is nanothermite. It is thermite made by nanotechnological methods. The most important by the individual chips is that they are reactive, that they can still burn. It's very difficult. I cannot give you a demonstration of it. But in this case here, the experimentalist is applying a microtorch, and in here there is a 1 millimeter big chip. So you can barely see it here. But those sitting close can see he's moving the torch from right to left. But those sitting close here can see a little yellow flame just sticking out when he's approaching the chip. And actually he could feel that something hit his hand, but he couldn't find the particle afterwards. But instead of doing, of course, in science, this was a very rough demonstration. We put the thing into an instrument called a calorimeter, and so you heat it up very slowly, and suddenly at one temperature, this 430 degrees, bam, it suddenly goes like that, off the roof actually. So there's a reaction here, which this is the heat development from the very, very small sample. It's a very, very delicate instrument actually. And so it is reactive. This is the most important. And iron is formed in the process, elemental iron, because this is what a chip could look like when it comes out of this instrument. I just showed you where we made the curve. Then we open the instrument and we take the thing out. It could look like this. What you see here is this iron sphere is not quite perfect, and this is because it's only one sphere. It's because it's so isolated. When you have the big volume, they would have been perfectly round. And so this is what comes out of the instrument after we've done this measurement. This is a lucky find from World Trade Center dust. And it's a lucky find because it's a partly reacted chip. Here you see the chip, some of it has reacted, some of it remains, which is the yellow area here. And to the chip is adhering, is sticking an iron sphere. And then we apply, of course, this technology I showed you. We can do energy dispersion spectroscopy to certify that this is actually the same material here and there. Okay, before I close, I show you another video where there are no subtitles, English subtitles. It's David Chandler again. And the reason why I have to keep this for the end, because I have to tell you about nanothermite first. Because what's happening here, I think, is very strange. You'll namely see that some of the fragments, this is the South Tower, and it was the North Tower you saw before. You saw some of the fragments where being thrown out actually goes to the ground faster than free fall. Now, how can something possibly move faster than free fall? Well, it can if you fire a rocket from a tower to the ground. It moves faster than free fall. You will see some fragments coming out of the tower, and then it suddenly changes direction like that. Now, it comes out like that, it goes like that. Okay? What's happening here? I don't know, honestly. But I think, personally, I think that it is our red grade chips, our nanothermite is play here, because you can apply it as paint, if you wish. It's a very versatile material. You can spray it on, you can paint it on. I don't know why these fragments behave like this. But besides that, this video is useful, and now we're kind of going back to what I've said earlier, for two reasons. First of all, maybe you remember when David Chandler was talking about how the towers came down. He mentioned something called the pile driver theory, namely that the top of the tower should crush down its way through the rest of the tower. So here, the distance between the microphone and this remote control is where the airliner hit, okay? So the airliner came in here, boom, and then the top crushes its way through the tower. This is what many people think. It's called the pile driver theory. But you'll see here two things. First, you can quite obviously see the explosions going on above the point of the airliner impact. Next, you'll see how the top section, this is the South Tower, the top section, how the top section starts tilting like that. Now, if this was been an ordinary collapse, this top section would have continued like that. Because it what the physics call, it has an angular momentum. When it starts turning, it doesn't stop turning. So it should have gone like that. It doesn't. It disappears. It simply disappears. Here we go. It's not so long, this one. We're only a few minutes left.
This is the destruction of the South Tower of the World Trade Center, viewed from a helicopter to the south. This particular video clip is rich in details that call the official story into question. Notice the numerous explosions on the west side of the building above the impact point. As the top 30-floor section falls, it tips to the east. It starts off intact, but then it disintegrates in midair. Gravity alone could not cause the top section to disintegrate. When an object is in free fall, there are no internal stresses. It should have hit the ground in one piece, but it didn't. Some of the debris is clearly being accelerated by forces other than gravity. These effects can be caused by late firing explosives, which can produce a white smoke trail. White smoke, consisting of aluminum oxide, is a byproduct of the thermite reaction. While producing this video, I ran across one rocket projectile I had not seen commented on before. This one stopped midair and changed directions. Even taking perspective effects into account, this projectile lost one component of momentum and gained another. That requires an impulse. Note that the rocket trail does not point back to the building, but the point where the impulse occurred. Let's take it from the top. There's a lot going on. Watch for the smoking guns.
Yeah, as I told you in the introduction, 4 years ago, I thought that the towers were, the World Trade Center were the Twin Towers, and I didn't speculate much about it. But then, accidentally, one day, I saw Building 7. And as a physicist, no, as a scientist, I'm a chemist. As a scientist, I'm trained to try to understand what is going on around me. And most of the time, I'm doing okay. But in this special occasion, for once, somebody told me this is World Trade Center, and I said, what? Why haven't I seen this before? Why haven't I seen this before? And another thing is, I couldn't understand what was going on. And it took me a couple of weeks to understand that this was the most important event in my generation. And from that day, I have not had any time off. So my summary is very short. It lasts only 6.5 seconds. And then I wish to thank you all for coming out in spite of this wonderful weather, and it has been great meeting you all. Thank you. And we can have a nice discussion now and questions, and is there still any remaining problems? Yes, please.
You've got any information about the use of termate?
The
military
thermate is something coming up. Yeah. Very obviously. Thermate is thermite when you have sulfur added. And sulfur has the effect of it lowers the melting point of the steel. So the thermite cuts much easier through. And this is very typical, you use it for military applications. There is one unambitious, completely without any question, doubt, evidence collected by Jonathan Corbett is his name, where you can actually see, by applying the same technique I'm talking about here, where you can see sulfidation of the steel, which means, in my opinion, that at least 2 kinds of thermite was applied to the towers. There's no doubt the thermate was in place. We have been here already for too long a time. I can't cover everything. In an earlier version of my presentation here, I also covered the thermate. There's no doubt the thermate was used too. Probably for cutting the big beams. And what we do not know where the nanothermite comes in. We do not know which role it played. It was because you can, by virtue of the nanotechnology, you can use the energy into an explosive. So if it served as an explosive or an incendiary, we do not know. We do not know what the exact role played by the thermite. That's why I played this Chandler video in the end here, because this leaves a big question mark In my opinion, there's something going on with technology which is not in the public domain. This is military research. Yeah.
But that was a very interesting fact when I remember the first photographs that you showed, the split one.
Mm.
Left was the workers, right was this diagonal 45 degrees cut column.
Okay.
There was a very nice detail, not that obvious on your photograph.
Mm.
I'm proud I have this photo in a better resolution, and you can see at the bottom of the cut these melted, what we call in German, Nussdruels.
Yeah.
This melted iron. It was seeable in this in your photo,
Yeah.
but not that good.
Yeah.
You can see how the melted iron was dropping down the column.
Yes. And this you would not see if the column had been cut with a torch.
Sure.
Of course. And any worker would go horizontally over it. He would never cut it like that because it takes 3 times more time to get that. Yes, please.
And in addition, maybe we could measure the speed of this debris with the program you just talked about before. You measure the speed of the tower coming down.
Yeah, David Chandler did. Yeah,
like maybe to figure out whether this one really accelerated. Like whether
yeah, the one going faster. Yeah, if you go ahead, man. We
I
need
have a program.
Go ahead.
What happened with the airplanes?
Pardon? What?
With the airplanes?
The airplanes?
Pulverized.
Where they were?
Yeah. They are really flight in?
Oh yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
The engines, they found some of the engines that went through. You could, yeah, actually, it was one of the very first pictures where you could see the trajectory of the engines going through.
The engines are, that's great.
No, some of them, they found it on the ground, on the other side. Yes, madam?
But there must have been lots of action before the houses blow up.
Oh yeah.
Lots of cables and workers who fixed the parts to blow the houses up.
Yeah, and this is an argument that comes up very frequently. They must have taken months to prepare.
Yeah.
Half years to prepare. Oh yes.
They did.
Oh yes.
They did.
But if you think about the very last days, there was a power down in the World Trade Center complex for 2.5 days. In the weekend prior, there must be 9 days before that. They closed. There was no power in the whole building, and which you can discuss why they did it. Because at that time there was a power down. There was people running out, and all the automatic doors were open, and all the alarms were off, and everything. And there were some people running around with cables and stuff, and they said it was because they should renew the IT, what you call the data.
Network cables.
Yeah, in the building. It could also have been because they wanted the banks to back up their systems. I know a guy called Scott Forbes who was actually the leader in the South Tower on the top floors. They had a huge bank. I forgot the name of the bank itself. But they were so angry because it meant that they had to back up the whole bank files, which is a very, very complicated thing. But if he hadn't done that, the bank didn't exist. A bank without its computer files doesn't exist. But of course, how can people get in and out of the buildings with tons and tons and tons of explosive material without being recognized? And for this question, I refer you, being interested, to a series of papers written by Kevin Ryan, who is one of my co-authors to this scientific paper, and he has written 4 papers called Access to the Towers. And what he's doing is his first access, Eingang. His first, how did you get into the towers? Because if you knew who had access to the towers, you would know a lot. And it's an eye-opening reading, where he's simply looking at what were the companies on the floors where the planes hit. What were the companies who had the contracts for renovation of all the elevators? What were the companies who had the contracts for renovation of the fireproofing of the steel structure? What were the companies who were taking care of the insurance? What were the companies who were taking care of security in the building? Who were the companies who got the contracts of the clean-out operations, etc., etc.? And you'll see how the persons and how the commercial relationships between these companies are a breathtaking network. And you can think for yourself. All you need to get in and out of a building is you have to know the man in the door, the partner, what you call him, yeah? The partner, yeah. All you have to be good friends with him and you can drive in and out. I've been asked, how did they get in with the explosives? I would say on pallets. This is, what do you call it in English? On paletten, yeah? How would you get in and out with 100 tons of explosives? Yeah, of paletten. Of course.
That's another interesting fact. Since that peculiar chic 10 years before arranged this explosive in the garage under the towers, they had patrolling explosive sniffing dogs. Don't know the correct name.
Yeah.
These dogs sniffing for explosives. These were detected 10 days before the 11th.
They took home the dogs, the bomb sniffing dogs. Yeah, well, everything, well, if that's it, maybe I should give the last word. Was that a question?
What are your next steps?
Our next steps?
Yeah, your next steps.
Your next step.
My
next step?
Going home.
Yeah, because
He's a hotel.
there's another story to the official story, and now how you will, or how
Well, I'm part of something called the 9/11 Truth Movement, which every time I talk about it, I get it up in my throat. Because this is hundreds of thousands of people all over the world who all recognize that there is something important, very important here. And if you care the least about our society and how things are going, I promise you everything is connected, nothing is accidental. And 9/11 is the key event. Or what has happened the last 10 years, all of them converge into 9/11. This is where everything started. Denmark has never been, well, we are in 3 wars, okay? Danish young men and women are dying in Afghanistan trying to catch Osama bin Laden. Like that. Things like that, all these things. If you care about that, then 9/11 is important. And all these people all over the world, they have the same feeling, no matter, and we're talking about Malaysia, we're talking about Australia, we're talking about Canada, the United States. I have had an email from West Madagascar where I say, keep up the good work. And so it's all over, and all these individuals are acting on their own. Nobody tells anyone what to do. Everyone has a little voice in here saying, you have to do something. And everybody is doing whatever they can do wherever they are. It's 2 young kids in Cardiff in England. They go down to the main street and pass out flyers. And it makes me very, very sentimental. I think it's a fantastic thing. Nobody tells anyone what to do. Everybody is just acting from where they are in time and space and what they can do. And I think it's beautiful. And this is, you don't find 9/11. 9/11 finds you. And 9/11 found me at the chemistry department of the University of Copenhagen. And I'm a chemist. I can read the reports. So it was my duty to read the reports and tell the world about it. And this is what I do. Yes, please. Thank you.
Also, die letzten Worte, die er gesagt hat, treffen auch auf mich zu. Ich bin auf 9/11 gekommen, nicht weil ich durch Zufall das mal gehört habe, sondern ich habe es einfach so ein paar Jahre vergessen. Und dann, weil es auch in den Medien heruntergehalten wird. Und dann habe ich im Internet einen Film gesehen, die DVD davon liegt da hinten in den großen Umschlägen, die großen braunen Umschläge. Und bin da gleich 2 Stunden vor hängen geblieben und seitdem bin ich dabei. Ich kann jedem nur sagen, was ich da auch sage, ist die Entschuldigung. Die Leute, die heute nicht hier waren, kriegen von mir Mail und die können sich in den Spiegel stecken. Alle anderen gehen mal in die Zelle zurück. Und dann werte ich das aus und dann sehen wir ja, wie die Meinungen sich hier geändert haben. Ich kann euch nur sagen, das Internet ist die letzte Freiheit, die wir haben. Und wer das nicht glaubt, kann mir. Das war alles.